We've gotten to week 6 of the World Religions course and the study of Hinduism. The very word Hinduism is somewhat problematic in the sense that the word was imposed upon the religions of the Indus Valley by British colonists, essentially. Before that, by merchants with the East India Company, who had a commercial interest in India because of the spice trade and the tea trade. They didn't know what to make of this plethora of indigenous village tribal religions in the Indus Valley. The valley surrounds the river, the Indus. These tribes seem to worship elephant gods and monkey gods and gods with all kinds of animalistic or hybrid heads and faces, and they were rather clumsily cast together and called Hinduism. Nobody identified as a Hindu, however. This label was ascribed from the outside by the European observers. Each of these religious devotions in given villages and tribes and clans existed fairly independently. What did bind them together, though, is they did have a devotion to scriptures called the Vedas, and they believed in reincarnation, and they believed that ultimately there is one reality, Brahman, maybe somewhat identifiable with the idea of God in a monotheistic sense, but I think that's a question well worth discussing critically. So they were branded Hindu, essentially. Now, I think it's fair to say in the world today, people will identify as Hindu, although they'll still use other descriptors for this constellation of religions, sometimes called Vedic Dharma, for example. So while Hinduism is sometimes presented as a polytheistic religion with this pantheon, to borrow a Greek term, of gods, not only hundreds of them, arguably thousands of them, there's also the argument that this is not a polytheistic religion with almost innumerable gods. Rather, it's a monotheistic religion that uses these god and goddess images as avatars or icons that point to aspects of this ultimate reality called Brahman. And many Hindus would argue that quite vehemently. So Brahman means ultimate reality, somewhat akin to the Abrahamic idea of God, somewhat. Again, always dangerous to make direct equations across different religious traditions. Just like in languages, words don't always have an exact translation, so it is with religions. So I did say that these religions of the Indus Valley had things in common, like a belief in reincarnation. And that's one aspect of Hinduism that we'll delve into this week. Reincarnation is the idea that we are our soul, or Atman, in Hindu terms. And your soul or Atman can be reincarnated after death in any kind of body, human or otherwise. So you could be reincarnated as a stallion grazing on this beautiful meadow somewhere, or you could be a maggot crawling around on the carcass of a dead sewer rat, surrounded by excrement. So there's vast possibility as to how he could be reincarnated. And this idea of reincarnation in Hinduism goes hand in hand with the idea of karma, or cosmic justice. This suggests that your next reincarnation will be partly a consequence of how you live this life. You may have bad karma to work off, and you may have a very challenging reincarnation to work off your bad karma, your bad energy that you gathered through your immoral actions. Or good karma may lead to a much more pleasant reincarnation. Now, it might look as though being reincarnated again and again is something which Hindu people would relish. You get more and more lives. However, that's not the goal of Hinduism, or the goal, I should say, the goal of reality or of life from a Hindu perspective. The goal is to escape from this cycle of reincarnations, to work off all your bad karma so as to experience moksha. Now, moksha is not heaven. That would be a bad equivalency to draw, because heaven in the Abrahamic religions is the idea of an eternal loving relationship with God, where it would seem as though you remain conscious in order for it to be loving, and you still have your identity as yourself. Moksha, that Hindus look forward to when they escape from the wheel of reincarnation, is closer to nothingness. It is presented in positive terms as peace and tranquility and just entering into the cosmos, but not as a conscious, identifiable human being anymore. Yourself um, just becomes dispersed in the ether, as it were. And that's seen as a welcome relief from a Hindu perspective. Whereas the concept of oblivion or becoming nothing might seem terrifying to people coming from a more westernized perspective, loosely informed by Christianity. So it's a very different goal. The goal is peace as an absolute nothingness, as opposed to heaven in the sense of conscious afterlife with God and with others. So karma does raise questions, doesn't it? I mean, as a theory, I mean, what do you think of the idea that people in bad situations may be in those situations because of bad karma that they acquired in previous lives? How would this make sense of the situation of a child born into some terrible situation, or born with a disability, life shortening disease, perhaps? What about the good person who we've all met them, the saint, and they're diagnosed with stage 4 cancer? I mean, is that karma? And if karma exists and people have these difficult or horrible situations in life because of what they've done in past lives, what does that say about the struggle for social justice? The Abrahamic religions would mandate us to work for the dignity of the poor and for justice. Is there a temptation, if we believe in karma, to say, well, they made their bed, let them lie in it? Or what would be the logic of trying to improve their lot if that is their just desert, or that's what needs to happen for them to eventually encounter moksha? Would we even be doing people a service by, as it were, kind of releasing them from the situation in which they find themselves? That's called their dharma, like their duty or their vocation. And we look also at a specific manifestation of this kind of thinking in the caste system in India, where people are born into classes that are ascribed a set role in society. And one class of classes is the untouchables, who have traditionally engaged in work nobody else wanted to do. Dealing with dead bodies, dealing with effluent, dealing with dead animals. That's the work of the untouchables. Now, to be very upfront about it, not all Indian people endorse this, and there is definitely pushback against the caste system in India. So this is in no way to create a stereotype of Indian society or Indian people. And there is a considered opinion that the caste system was exacerbated by the British occupation, that it suited the occupation quite well to do some divide and conquer by really emphasizing the caste system as it already existed, but endorsing it and using it to subjugate people, keep them in their place, basically. Because that would be an argument against the caste system, that people are born in a given life situation and they're kept in their place. The universe wants you there doing that. Again, not all Indians endorse this, and even within Hinduism, there is diversity of thought, to be fair. But the discussion post will seek your thoughts on that. What do you think about karma as an explanation for suffering? Some religions might say suffering is the work of evil, the work of the fall, the devil, human injustice. Karma suggests that our suffering may be, at least in part, a result of our own choices and actions in past lives. So what does that say about suffering and about what our response to suffering might be? But again, Hinduism is so diverse and vast a religion that you might even argue it's not fair to call it a religion. It's a label that was attached to a whole constellation of religions by European people from the outside. So it's especially important not to be forming stereotypes about Hindus in general. There are lots of sects and groups within this vibrant and diverse constellation of religions. But I'm dying to see your thoughts on this discussion post about karma and suffering, dying being an unfortunate choice of words, given that we're we're talking about reincarnation largely. It's also interesting to hear what people think about reincarnation. You could add your thoughts on that. There are people who claim to be members of other world religions that don't officially have a doctrine of reincarnation. For example, Christianity doesn't, Islam doesn't, and yet they'll say that they've had deja vu experiences, or they're tempted to think that there's something to the idea of reincarnation. That would be fascinating also. Thank you so much.